Hello, Cowboy Church, Sock River Cowboy Church people. We're ready for the next installment on our pivot point studies. Just let me welcome you wherever you're watching this from. Thank you for sticking with us, and we hope you're learning from this and growing from it. Let me remind you, some are asking me how they can get the study manual that goes with it. It's the document that I wrote that I'm teaching from. Go to the Sock River Cowboy Church website, and there on the Sock River Cowboy Church website you'll find a PDF file where you can download you a copy of this and follow right along. So Sock River Cowboy Church, and then you go to the PDF file, wherever that is, and download it for you. Okay, we're going to start today talking about life outside of Eden. Life out of the Eden, Genesis chapter 4. This is going, you get the story. Adam and Eve began to have children. They started having children there. Some suggest that in the perfect state they're in the garden, that they may have had children, maybe not. Maybe God would have given them more. We just don't know. But once that the curse came upon mankind and we're sentenced to die, we're going to die, then the reproduction of the human race became an issue and important, and that's why Genesis chapter 4, 5, 6, and all 4 and 5 begin to talk about things like that in that regard. Some have said that there would have been in the garden, had there been reproduction, it would have been slower in cycle, less painful, and the sexual necessities that are so rampant with with the human reproductive system now, how the urgencies and the neediness, the sexual need would have been much less in the garden, but have been ramped up because of the curse and the fall. Well, things went bad in Eden, and they didn't get any better outside after they were driven out, and the cherubim was there set at the garden entrance with a flaming sword to keep people out. So the children that were born outside of the garden were, of course, then Cain and Abel. Cain was the boy that didn't get the blessing of God on things. Now, we don't know why. There's the instance of his offering, which was a grain offering, where Abel's offering was a blood offering, an animal offering. And a case can be made for the blood-only offering, signifying the blood of Christ and all that. But generally, I mean, they were both still offerings, but for some reason, which I honestly don't think the Bible tells us, Cain's offering was not accepted. And I got a suspicion that maybe God didn't accept Cain either. Or maybe Cain was somehow different, didn't believe that as the way did Abel. Now, there's a lot of things. Of course, I forgot to tell you the Cain and Abel. Cain killed Abel, his brother, and so the first murder that we have in the Bible occurred there between the first two sons, Cain and Abel. Well, the lineage of Cain brings about, many complications. Let me get a drink of coffee. We have, in other words, Cain gives us a lot of, confusions. It makes us scratch our head a lot about Cain. We know that he was jealous, of course. For instance, this question's always come up: why was Abel's sacrifice so much better? And Cain then was given a mark to warn people not to kill him. And so some of us, people like me would ask, what people would that be that he was afraid was going to kill him? Let's see, let me do the math here. Adam, Eve, Abel's dead, Cain, Adam, Eve, 3. So the point is, I don't know. There's more behind this story than we know. But then again, we find out that Cain began a line of descendants. And many of the names that Cain used in his lineage, as his children were named down through the line, many of those names were also used in Seth's line. Seth was the third born child of Adam and Eve, the boy, to replace Abel. And so Seth's lineage and Cain's lineage, again, shared a lot of common names. And it's a little confusing if you don't understand that one group is Cain, one is Seth. I put a note in my notes here that kind of funny. It says, did they run out of? Was there a name shortage back in those days? Of course, no. There was a much different reason for that. Cain built a city for Enoch, his son. Cain had a son, and Seth had an Enoch also. But who would inhabit this city with Enoch? Now I understand that by the time we get to Enoch, we're getting down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We're getting like 6 or 7 generations now down from Adam, and so there could be a lot of people. So that one I understand, but there is a lot of confusion in Cain's lineage. One of his grandchildren, Lamech, married 2 wives. You can see how that could cause problem. But in time, we're going to unwind some of this Cain anti-God stuff, but for this focus of this study now, we're going to let you do that on your own, and we'll move on to other things. But again, Cain's lineage brought a lot of confusion into the bloodline. Okay, Adam and Eve had the 3rd son. His name was Seth. In turn, he produced people who called upon the name of the Lord. Now that's interesting and curious. I think what you do to understand this, you need to contrast it with Cain's people walked away from the Lord, and Seth's people or lineage started calling on the name of the Lord. So that's how I want you to contrast that. You'll see, I think, more of what that means. Let me read you out of Genesis chapter 5 the names of the children born to Adam and then his grandchildren. So we have Adam, then we have Seth, we have Enos, we have Canaan, then we have Mahalalel, Jared, Enoch, Methuselah, Lamech, Noah. So just run down through that, because there is something here in this naming. Dr. Chuck Missler, one of the greatest minds, Bible students with one of the sharpest minds ever. He had a PhD in physics. He analyzed this and looked deeply into it, and he began to translate the names of the people born, and he translated like this. From Hebrew to English, he put Adam, and was translated in English to be man. Seth was appointed. Enosh was mortal. Canaan, sorrow. Mahalalel, the blessed God. Jared, shall come down. Enoch, teaching. Methuselah, his death shall bring. Lamech, the despairing. And then Noah, rest or comfort. Now, I'm going to read you those names in order, and I want you to listen to them as a sentence or as a statement from God. Now, this is just in the name translations. We have this: man, appointed to mortal sorrow, the blessed God shall come down, teaching his death shall bring the despairing rest. Tell me that's a coincidence. I tell you what, guys, and this lets me see the hand of God on this. And I see God all over it, giving us the gospel story, the redemption story, in the names of the first people listed in the Bible. What a mighty God we serve. This is fascinating to me. In the days of Jared, now you come down to, that'll be Adam, Seth, Enosh, Canaan, Mahalalel, Jared. And when we get to the time of Jared, we find in the writing of the book of Enoch, we're told about the watcher angels. The watcher angels were, I call them watcher class angels. They came to the earth. They were probably put here for thousands, if not millions of years prior to this time, with the responsibility to watch over the earth. I don't know what that means. I don't know. Did that mean watch how the planet forms, watch how people interact, how animals grow? Or, I don't know. That's way above my pay grade. But they were to watch. And then after then man was made. God made Adam, and then the children of man began to cover the earth, but to spread out around the earth and populate the earth. And then we find in Genesis chapter 6 that a very confusing thing happened. And the confusing thing was that the watcher angels began to be jealous of the human beings and wanted to have families, just like human beings had families. They watched them with their children, and they wanted to have families. And so they began to lust after human women, to reproduce with human women. And so they mixed their genetic seed of the angels with the genetic seed of the human women. And then, of course, produced the hybrid off-breed the Bible calls Nephilim. Nephilim is a plural. The I am on the end of it indicates its plurality. But you take the Nephal was the name, and that translates from the Hebrew to those that fall, to fall. So these created beings, these angels, interbred with human women and produced this offspring, this hybrid offspring called the Nephilim. Now we also know from the readings in Enoch and other places that when the angels began to tinker with the genetics of humanity, it may have been sexual, but it could also have been done technically in like a gene splicing or some sort of other form of manipulating with the reproductive issues. Now, because the angels, came from God with the technology that would be extremely bigger and better than our technology, they could have done that. Now, we're doing that today. We're gene splicing, we're tweaking with nature, we're genetically modifying our crops, etc. And we're doing this with 21st century technology. But I suspect that the angels, the Watcher class angels, had much more technology than we did and better understood these issues. Now, what we learn from Enoch and other extra biblical writings is that not only did the Watcher angels tinker with human genetics, but they also tinkered with animal genetics and plant genetics. Part of the reason I think that they did this is my opinion, is because when they were born, these hybrid individuals, these Nephilim, they were huge in stature. In some places, I think it's in the book of Amos, it says that they were as tall as the cedars of Lebanon, which is 30 feet plus tall. Well, were they that tall? Were they that big? We don't know, but they were giants and monstrosities. But imagine this. Imagine something that large with an enlarged appetite. And then there would be not one of them, but thousands of them. So what they would do, they would wipe out the human foodstuffs. And so I suspect they set about to genetically alter crops, animals, whatever, to increase the productivity, to feed them. And that is my opinion. One little thing I want to help you, that will help me make that case, is that if you'll remember in the book of Numbers, when the spies went into the promised land and they came back, they were carrying clusters of grapes. And read the description in Numbers about the size of the cluster of grapes. This is not normal or natural. These were genetically modified or altered foodstuffs and product. This opens up the door to today of about genetically engineered food that we consume, human beings today. What does that do to us? When we, human beings, made in God's image, consume some foodstuffs that was not made from God's hand, but were altered. I don't know. It's something for us to consider. Many people try to walk away from the genetically altered food But you know, and I talk to many good, godly people who are in the agricultural area, and they ask the question, how are we going to feed this planet as food crisis continues and other things? The population expands. We need crops that can produce more, bigger animals, bigger cattle, bigger sheep, and then we need wheat and corn and all the other grain crops, cereal crops, that we need them to be able to produce more and more to feed our planet. And it's true, I get it. But I go back always to think about this problem. And that is, when God created the earth, he would do something. He would separate the night from the day, and he'd separate the land from the dry land from the water. And at each of the days, day one, day two, he would stand back and he would comment upon his work. And he would say, it was good. It was good. It was good. Or then finally, on man, he said, it's very good. Now, let's deal with this thought. When God makes something and calls it good, in my book, it's perfect. So when you take perfection and you add anything to it, you cause it to be less perfect. So you can't add to perfection and result in anything but imperfection. So the question just screams at us the danger and the problem of mixing and changing God's blueprint for humanity, for human beings, for animals, for crops. What is that going to do for us? And of course, we don't know where that's going to go yet. We have this thing called unintended consequences. We don't know where this is going to go. But you can at least see why now we're going to call Genesis chapter 6 pivot point number 2. Because this is a huge pivot point. Now, the question then that needs to be asked is, why would God destroy every living thing that he'd made on the earth? Why would he do that? And the answer comes back to the story of Noah and the Nephilim. The Bible teaches us in Genesis chapter 6 that these things that were born to human women and angelic, the Watcher class angels, they were not created in God's image. They were not created by the hand of God. They were created from humanity and these angels. And so they were not perfect. They were watering down the genetics of humanity. And it was God's plan that human beings populate the earth, that subdue the earth, it says in Genesis, and replenish it. It was God's plan that humanity do that. It's also God's plan to redeem humanity and not to redeem a fallen group of angels. So here we go now. The planet at this point, by the time Noah gets on the scene, we have all of this mixing of genetics, plants, animals, fish, birds, man. And the world is in chaos and a mess. So God stands back and he says, I got to fix this. And so he decided to destroy the earth with a flood to end the genetic confusion. Now, if you'll remember, it says, and Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. Noah found grace. And it says he was perfect in his generations. Makes me wonder if it wasn't he was perfect in his genetics all the way back to Adam. We can trace it right back. He was a true human being, one of the only true human beings alive at that time, at that point in time. The book of Enoch tells us that the watcher angels came to the earth and began their crossbreeding during the days of Jared. During when Noah's when Jared was here, that's when this happened. So sometime they challenged the allegiance to the Most High. I think the watcher angels were created as righteous angels, and they did a righteous job. They did perfect jobs. But then when the fall happened in heaven, when the angel wars occurred, I suspect that these watchers we're talking about here joined the rebel cause, and so they became rebel angels, still with the commission to watch, but they were now they were confused about it, and they had fallen from their standing with God. So when we read this, it was not God's plan, and so God, to fix it, sent a flood. I want to read now Genesis chapter 6, and from the middle of page 15. Genesis 6 from the middle of 15. In the days of Jared, that's where it starts. Let's go to Genesis 6. When human beings began to increase in number on the earth, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of humans were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose. Then the Lord said, my spirit will not contend with humans forever, for they are mortal. Their days will be 120 years. Okay, how do we sort this out? Here's what I think happened. Whenever these angels crossbred with humanity, human beings were living at this time 900 years probably. Methuselah was 969. You can look it up, reread Genesis and see how long they were living, 900 years. But when these Nephilim were born to the human women, they had the spirituality, as it were, or the spirit nature of an angel, but they had the physicality of a human. But because of that, because an angel never dies, an angel is made to live forever, to be in existence forever. So these Nephilim, the problem would have been, here was this messed up, not formed by God creature that was destroying the earth, and they was going to live forever. So God limited their days, I believe, to 120 years there in verse 3. So the bodies of these bastardized children, they would get old now because they're going to die. So they would die, eventually die. But then we come with another issue, and that is, what is a demon? Okay. Now, a demon, we meet them very frequently in the New Testament. Jesus dealt with them all the time. And it seems that they're invisible entity, being, things, but they desire human or bodily occupation. They like to live in something. They want to have a habitation. Now, why is that? Okay, think with me on this. What if, when the bodies of the Nephilim children, of the Watcher women, what happens when their bodies died? Their eternal spirits, inherited from their angelic fathers, they had no place to go because they had lost their body. What if that is what we're talking about here? What if it's the demons of the New Testament are nothing more than the Nephilim intellects floating the earth, looking for a body, looking for something to inhabit, something to possess, would be modern terminology. You see, if you think about the story of Jesus and the Gadarene demoniac. In that story, the demoniac came to Jesus. Jesus cast the demons out of him, and the demons begged Jesus before he cast him out of the demon-possessed man. They begged Jesus to let them go into a herd of swine, because they didn't want to be unhoused. They didn't want to be without a habitation. And so Jesus let them go into the swine so they'd have a house. Well, the story of the swine didn't want it, didn't like that at all, so they ran and drowned themselves in the ocean. Okay, so that adds weight to this argument, I think, that these are the demonic spirits are the Nephilim giant children's spirits that have been without bodies now, and they're still roaming the earth, all over the earth, looking for things to possess, things to inhabit. All right. Back to Genesis 6, Genesis 6:4. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days. That's the days before the flood. And also afterward. Let me read that again, because I want that to soak in. The Nephilim, Genesis 6:4. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went into the daughters of humans and had children by them. They were the heroes of old, men of renown. Now, I am one of those people, I'm one of those Bible interpreters that believes the Bible is true. You may not. You may doubt the Bible's veracity and may think it's just stories or whatever. I believe it is true and accurate in all forms. And I believe it is inerrant. Now, to do that, I'm going to draw some conclusions from that. And I don't see how anyone can reach other conclusions unless you interpret it some other way that, and maybe even doubt its veracity. I'm going to make the case that in Genesis chapter 6, some really weird stuff happened. Strange stuff. Science fiction sounding, fantasy like things happened. There as the angels crossbred with humanity and created a Nephilim. For many years, I've been a preacher for a long, long time. And many times before, when I would preach through the book of Genesis, when I got to Genesis 6, I would start another series or something, or skip chapter 6, because it just seemed so crazy. So off the fantasy scale, science fiction stuff. And then I began to ask the Lord about 15 years ago in my life. I said, Lord, I want to know. I think there's things I need to know. And I've just skipped over. And I began to ask God to reveal things to me. And he began to open up Genesis chapter 6 for me. And wow, has that changed so much of my understanding of the Word of God. I heard a man say this past week that Genesis chapter 6 is like a Rosetta Stone. If you don't know what that is, look it up. It's like a Rosetta Stone that helps us understand the rest of the Bible. It explains so much when you look at it through the lens of Genesis chapter 6. It changes everything. It talks about things. Now you'll know what Jude was talking about when Jude wrote his epistle or whatever it is. You'll understand then what Paul meant when he told women when they go into to church to pray, to cover their heads. And then he says, because of the angels. And we've just glossed over that or said, what? What does he mean, because of the angels? Well, now we get it. It's all due to this Genesis 6 confusion that was put in place here. Now, the question of why does Jesus come to the earth needs to be put in right here. Because maybe you've wondered. Maybe you're a Christian and you have, someone's asked you or you've heard Jesus came to die for the sins of humanity. And guess what? He's absolutely right. Jesus died to redeem man, to buy us back, to get us out of the fallen army, the fallen rebellion, and move us back into the righteous line of Adam through the second Adam, Jesus. That's right, and that's what we've been taught. We hear that in Sunday school. We hear that in Bible school. We hear that in Bible studies. We get it. But is there another reason? And I think there is two reasons. He came to fix mankind, and he also came to deal with the fallen angels, to deal with their mess-ups of the earth. And in time, as we read Revelation and connect it all together, he's going to literally rid the universe of these creatures as we get close to the end of the book of Revelation. So why did Jesus come to earth? To save mankind and also to deal with the fallen angel issue. Now there's another word we glossed over here that I was in our reading. I want to go back and pick it up. And that is, it says, and they were on the earth in those days and afterward. What does that mean? That means, well, that not only were the Nephilim here prior to the flood, but somehow they're here now after the flood and also afterward. So, did the flood not kill everything? Yeah, it did. The Bible says it wiped the earth of all living things, all breathing things, all life that breathed. It wiped that off. But so then how did these Nephilim get back? Why didn't the flood kill them? Or how did they get back? And then another question comes up is, if they came back after the flood, are they still here? And then, of course, we need to ask the question, would we recognize one today if we saw them? It's my opinion that the flood did indeed kill the bodies of the Nephilim living on the earth before the flood. But how did they get back? Well, there are several possibilities. Let me answer a few different ways. Mostly those, this just needs your imagination because we don't have any answers. But possibility number one is their angel fathers just took them off-world. They were space flight capable. Maybe they took them to another planet, inhabited planet, in another solar system, in another galaxy. We don't know. Took them off-world until the flood subsided. Maybe a possibility was that some of Noah's daughters carried Nephilim blood on the ark. So when they got off the ark, started having children, the Nephilim genetics came over the ark, came over the flood in the ark. Maybe possibility number three was that the Watchers again reproduced with women. In other words, what they did before the flood, they just picked up again after it was over and started the thing all over again. Again, it's our lack of imagination that will limit our answers here because we don't know. They're just speculation. In old mythologies, as you look and think about Greek mythology, Roman mythology, which are very similar, and then you look at other Aztec, Mayan mythology, American Indian mythology, Australian mythology, and you come across things, these gods they're called. We talked about this last session, but you meet these gods or heroes. The Greeks called them heroes, but they were widely known beings. They moved into the kingship in the early days because of their strength, because of their intellect, their wisdom. They were half angel, so they immediately became kings and rulers. And then in the ancient days, they probably lived for thousands of years before God had shortened their time. So that gives you a little historical, maybe a way to see that the Bible isn't the only book that talks about this category of creature. Now, I'm confident, I also believe, that we've not seen the last of the Nephilim either. They probably said, I believe, I've often wondered if the UFO phenomenon that we're experiencing now, and many people are saying that the UFO phenomenon is increasing, the frequency of it, the sightings are more frequent, and we're seeing more and more unidentified lights, orbs in the sky, and spacecraft, things that have the ability to seemingly break the laws of physics and go from a standstill to thousands of miles an hour or take a 90-degree turn. Recently, our Navy just released some pictures of fighter pilots following them and watching them do things that are impossible for something to be done with our current level of physics. So what is going on? What if the Nephilim have just simply stayed around and changed and altered their genetics, and no longer are they 30-foot tall giants eating up herds of cattle and buffalo, but what if they're now more our size or even smaller and are living among us in different ways? For instance, if you watched some of the science fiction shows on TV or movies, one of the things that keep cropping up, this theme keeps cropping up, and that is, what are the angels doing? What are these UFO aliens doing? Well, they're getting human beings, and they're extracting from them human sperm and human eggs, and they're producing a hybrid. They're reproducing a hybrid race to populate the earth, half alien, half human. Folks, that's the same story of Genesis chapter 6. So I'm not saying that it's true. I'm not off my meds. This just gives us something to think about. There's a lot of similarities here. Well, while we're down this rabbit hole, what if DARPA, a defense agency's advanced weapons agency, what if they are working with this issue as well? Something tells me they are. I just have a sense about me that they are, and they're working on what they call a super soldier. Now, this is a being, a human being that has extra human or superhuman capabilities, characteristics. Eyesight improved. Maybe they used the cross genetics from an eagle and got eagle eyes, or maybe they crossed with wolves to give us stronger bones and hardier life bodies. I don't know. See, those are things that we simply have to ask ourselves and let our imagination sort of go, because we don't know. There's a thing called transhumanism. Dr. Tom Horn has written on this about transhumanism, and he postulates that human beings are being transformed into something half human, half machine. It's called transhumanism. And so if they can't get it done, if the fallen ones, the Nephilim, whatever, aliens, if they can't get it done genetically, they may be trying to do it in mechanically or biological mechanics. But nevertheless, we are being tinkered with. And I believe that's something very similar to what happened in Genesis chapter 6. Will we become non-human? At what point do we stop being human? What if the mark of the beast is a platform designed to alter the human genome? What if it's a platform, not just economic? Now, we know about the economic platform of the mark of the beast, where you can't buy or sell unless you have the mark. But what if it's more than that? Because, see, I'm sitting here around thinking, how could the alien Nephilim fallen angels, how could they talk us human beings into taking this mark of the beast, knowing that if we do, we damn our souls to hell? We're never going to be able to be saved, because that eliminates our names from the book of life. So how could they talk us into that? Well, what if they said to non-believers and people that were fringe, edgy, that weren't really true believers yet, but were kind of in the ballpark. What if they said to them, if you'll take this mark, it will inject into your body nanoparticles designed to fix your DNA and change you to where you'll live forever. You won't get old, you won't age, and your diseases will be cured. You won't have any more diseases. You'll be completely healed of all of them and won't ever get any more. What if they told you that would do it for you? You know, there's billions of people would run as hard as they could go to get that mark, to get the mark of the beast, that implant, that nanotechnology implanted into their bodies. There are several things that we read in the Bible that kind of go hand in glove here. One is, there's a point in the New Testament, in the book of Revelation, when the Bible says, and they longed for death, but they could not find it. What if this nanoparticle has fixed it where they cannot physically be killed? And even though they want to die, they can't. I don't know. There's just so many things in this area to make us scratch our heads and walk away. I want to say this very, very clearly, though. I am convinced that you or myself, we will never be fooled or tricked into taking the mark of the beast. It will never be, in other words, when we do it, when we take the mark of the beast, when people do, it'll be with full knowledge. They'll be very aware of what they're doing and why they're doing it. So, let me drive it home. Let me summarize it here. You will take the mark of the beast only willingly. You won't be tricked into it. Now, some are asking me, I don't know when you're going to watch this or what time, maybe years from now, but some are asking me if the COVID-19 virus, if the vaccinations, which they promise will be out in a year or so or whatever, they say, well, is that the mark of the beast? Well, I don't think so, but I think it could be a step along the way. I think it could be a beta test to see whether we'll take vaccines in the future. That's something just to think about. I'm simply not going to make any statement there. That will be up to you. You pray about it. You ask the Lord what you want to do. So let's read verse 5 now. The Lord saw how great the wickedness of the human race had become on the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time. And the Lord regretted that he had made human beings on the earth, and his heart was deeply troubled. So the Lord said, I will wipe from the face of the earth the human race I have created, and with them the animals and the birds and the creatures that move along the ground, for I regret that I have made them. Wow. These are extreme words, extreme statements from God. He regretted he had made us because we had changed and become hybridized and altered our DNA, and mankind had become monstrous, and animals had become out of control monsters. And he said, I'm going to wipe it off the face of the earth. Now, it says that Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. Now, verse 9 tells us exactly why I think Noah was favored by the Lord. He was blameless and walked faithfully with his God. Let's read verse 9. This is the account of Noah and his family. Noah was a righteous man, blameless among the people of his time, and he walked faithfully with God. Read that out of other translations, and it talks about a generations thing there. See, Noah's blamelessness set him apart from everything else on the earth. All these creatures that had been genetically altered. Noah and his family, his sons, were pure human beings, all the way back to Adam. They were very traceable, all the way back. If you've ever wondered why some of the gospel stories take so much time telling us the genetic history of Jesus, the lineage of Christ, they will take their time. They'll run him back. He was the son of this, the son of that, son of that, and they run him all the way back. And you can go to Abraham, and then you can jump on even to Adam. And you can. Why do they do that? So we'll know Jesus was a pure, true human being. No tainted blood in his genetics. Noah had 3 sons: Shem, Ham, and Japheth. So we're going to follow the trail of these boys and others as we come down through Adam's bloodline, as we come down to us today. Verse 11, now the earth was corrupt in God's sight and full of violence. God saw how corrupt the earth had become, for all the people of the earth had corrupted their ways. Verse 11 shows us the depth of the corruption and God's plan to fix it. And he said, I'm going to put an end to all people, and for the earth is filled with violence, for I'm going to destroy them and the earth. So there we have it. God destroyed the earth because fallen Watcher class angels mixed their genetics with human beings and created a race of monsters that were no longer human. And Jesus died for the human race. He didn't die for these monstrosities. Now, so let's come with me to the end of the story now. So here's Noah. He's living in this crazy world with monsters, half goats and half men, and men with horses' heads, and it's kind of like some crazy stories on TV today we watch. And here's Noah, and he's living with this, and he hears a whisper in his ear. God says, hey Noah, I want you to build an ark. I imagine Noah said, what's an ark, God? Well, then God said, it's a boat, a big boat. And I want you to build that boat because I'm going to send a flood. Noah said, what's a flood? He said, trust me, I'm going to send a flood. So he began to get into this, and so Noah built an ark. And God sent purely genetic animals to him to put on the ark. No crossbred, no half-breeded, monstrosities. And he sent them to Noah to put on the ark. Now, as I close, and I'm done here with this session, I want to remind you that God has a plan B. He always has a plan B. In fact, the whole Bible is a story of plan B, story of redemption. It's the story of God redeeming humanity, of redeeming me and redeeming you and me. It's a story of second chances, of restarts. And as we finish this study months later, when we get to the point at the end of Revelation, we're going to see that God is going to even redeem the planet Earth and the atmosphere. It's messed up. It is. Weather is out of control. Things, the heat, the temperatures are warmer some places, colder in other places. Climate change, it's different. Not debating what caused it, but I want you to notice this. God's going to fix it. Because when he comes back, he's going to create a new heaven and a new earth. Oh my, that's going to be great. Thanks for listening today. This has got a lot to think about. Genesis chapter 6 is one of the most mind-stretching books in the Bible, at least in the book of Genesis. And I hope that if you doubted what I've said or it doesn't make any sense to you, go back over it. Ask God to open your life and your heart up and understand it. Because I think you're going to find, if you take this story and use it as a new lens, as a lens to read the rest of the Bible, it's going to open your eyes to so many things. And now, does it change anything about salvation? No. Doesn't change anything about the cross? No, not at all. It just changes how we see the depth of redemption, how far it's going to go. So God bless you. Thanks for watching today.